biggest question for you, Mauricio, I know I'm not answering yet. So for you, Mauricio, tell us, what is your goal, right? Because strategies, we use different strategies for different goals, right? So, what is your main goal?
So repeat the question. What do you think is a better strategy? To join as a contributor to a well-known open source project, or to start your own project? So again, Mauricio, what is your goal?
Right. So yeah, what do you want? What do you accomplish, Mauricio? Because so I can start talking about it a little bit with both ideas, right? So, you know, if what you want to accomplish is, you know, if you want to do some piece of software, right? If that's what you want to do, that you want to work on some piece of software, and so if you want to work on, oh, I know. So sorry, if you want to do some piece of software, right, and then you want to use open source as a way to get people to contribute to whatever you're doing, right? Of course, starting your own project is the best thing, right?
Also, write something that's genuinely useful for you. Don't go looking for a problem to solve.
Right. Yes. No. So like Jim, for example, right? Jim did an awesome open source project, right? And so he started from scratch. And I don't see any problem in starting the project from scratch yourself, right? So I think that's all good. But the problem is, I mean, but if what your goal is to grow in your career, right? To improve your career, like you're trying to do, for example, right? I'm just gonna get you. I don't know what you want right now, but I'm gonna get in a minute. So if your goal is to improve your career, right? You start your own open source project it's a very, very long process to improve your career, right?
Yeah.
So it's much better if you join an existing open source project, because that's going to give you results much faster and much more interesting results, right? So that's kind of the general view of those two possibilities, right? So yes, it's doable to do both, right? It's doable that, you know, it's doable to create an open source project. It's also doable to participate in an existing open source, but for career growth, it's much better, much faster that you join an existing project. Oh, there's another side there. Okay, good. That's right. So yes, here.
It depends on what kind of impact you want to have and what the novel value is of your. If you wanted to start something original as well, you know, and you have to look at the addressable market for your idea. If you want to make it, if you want to start something that's brand new, you know, and then you have to take in and tell people about it as well. It can be a lot of work, but if you have friends in the industry who have a lot of reach, and then you can reach out to them and they can help you get the word out. So and of course you also have to convince them that it's really of value too, you know, but if you do create something that's unlike anything else, that has a significant value proposition, then yeah, you can certainly go for it. And but also, again, I come back to write something that you will enjoy maintaining, and that will be useful to you, and that you think will be useful to other people. Start with yourself first. Be selfish almost in a way, you know. But again, make it something that the code that you want to inhabit, and also something that you will use and that you will enjoy using, and that you can maybe even tell some neighbors about at a party, you know. So, but you don't have to do that, but it can be fun.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, open source. So here's what we're gonna do today, right? So and I think I have all set up now, right? So
Cool.
I think it's all good.
Great.
All right. So do you wanna announce anything? Should I introduce myself?
Sure. Yeah.
Want to say hello to the user group or something like this?
Yeah, sounds good.
Come here,
Yeah.
no, come here. Come
Okay,
here.
sure, you bet.
Yes, come here, because then you're gonna be recorded, right? So how about that?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's gonna be recorded on your camera, on my camera.
All right.
Lots
Sounds
of
good.
cameras, right?
Cool. All right.
Jim, it's so good to be here with you, man.
Oh, good to be here with you, Bruno.
So before Jim says anything, right? You know, I always tell Jim this. Houston is my go-to place, right? You know, every time I do a tour, I talk with Jim. Jim was like the first guy I talked to, right? Because really, you know, if Jim is unable to do something here, everything else that I'm gonna do in the rest of the trip gets harder, right? Because, so, and that's totally true, right? So Jim knows that, he's the first guy I reach out to. I see if if there's something that he can do. The Houston Java Group has always received me so well. So Jim, thank you so much. That's one more time, right? That we're doing something here first, right? And then we're gonna do the rest, right? So
Awesome.
Jim, thanks, man.
Hey,
Thanks for being such a great friend.
I'm glad we can be a
Thank
good
you.
home base for you.
Awesome.
This is
So,
great.
Go ahead, man. It's your show.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bruno. Appreciate it. So thank you for joining us on the internet. And if you're watching from, say, YouTube, it's really an honor to have you join us today. We're going to have Helio talk about his open source adventures and Bruno on how to leverage open source in your career, both as a user and how to participate, I would imagine, in the open source community to help make open source better, and how to leverage it in your products or your projects that you create and you participate in as part of your everyday day-to-day job. And also, we just talked a little bit about how to take and contribute to open source as well. And if you want to start a brand new idea, or if you want to take and contribute to an existing community as well. I've done both, and they're both very gratifying, because you can look at that and say, hey, I did that, I made that, I helped with that. And you can point to it on your resume too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Thank you so much, Bruno. And also one other quick thing. We have a Java user group meeting next Wednesday on the 12th of October. Garrett Grunwald will be coming, and he'll be talking about a new technology that's going into, or has been introduced into the OpenJDK. I can't remember. We'll find out more. But it's called CRAC. CRAC is the technology, and the talk is called "What the Crack." So basically, it'll help speed up JVM startup times by taking a snapshot of the JVM and then starting it from that snapshot instead of starting it from cold. And so it promises to help alleviate startup time issues with Java. So again, that's going to be October 12th, about 6:30, 7 p.m. We'll have pizza at 6:30, and we'll start the presentation at 7. And I am really excited. He's a very well-renowned individual, and excited to have him here. All right.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Jim. Once more, thanks, man. Thanks for receiving us here. That's great. All right, so let's get started then.
Almost forgot. If you want to sign up for that talk, if you want to RSVP, you can go to hjug.org and sign up on Eventbrite.
So I got a good pen here.
Oh, good. Hooray.
Yes, right. So I got a good pen here. Yeah.
Now I'm going to
I got it. Go ahead, no problem. Not that got recorded. Sorry, man. All right. Okay. So thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. We're going to be discussing open source today, right? So open source your way to career success. So I'm gonna approach this topic. It's a very important topic for the software developer. I think that open source is probably the best way for a software developer. So we're gonna approach that topic from a software developer perspective, right? So I want to make this a very interactive discussion. So feel free to ask questions at any time, right? Or make comments. Jim is going to be on the computer getting the question from people online, right? So whenever you have anything to say or ask, please let us know. Now, when Jim comes back, and maybe just you guys are working here. Do you know if there's a light here that we can turn on? Maybe not, right? Because I think the lights are already on here, right? Yeah.
Oh, you're talking, you mean extra lights here?
Yes, no, that's okay, right? Yeah, but I think, if you guys online can see the board nicely, I can just say, I'm BR Java Man on Twitter, right? So if you don't follow me yet, Java Man, right? So, can you guys see this well? From in the camera there? Yes, looks good. Is it okay? All right, good. Okay, so looks okay. Okay, good. Hey man, how you doing?
Good, how are
Good
you?
to see you. Right, cool.
Long time?
Long time no see you, right? Okay. So, and actually, I might even use Jordan here as an example, right?
Sure.
Because I was here yesterday for the Side Project Society meeting, right? So, and Jordan is one of the guys that created that community. And, so it's a community building effort, right? And we're here in the user group, and the user group is a community effort too. And open source is it's also a community effort, right? So, we're gonna talk about all those things in terms of community building and importance of community for your career and how open source fits and all that. So, one thing I want to start with is that every time we talk about open source, there's one thing that comes up and bubbles up really, really quick is licensing, right? So in the end, open source is a licensing scheme, right? So you have to understand that. So when you build a piece of software, that piece of software has it's copyrighted to you because you wrote it, or to your company because you sign a contract for your company saying that everything that you do is going to be the ownership of your company, right? So basically, every software we create, it starts as what we call proprietary software. It's someone is the owner of it, right? And the copyright laws basically says that anything that you do, no one can use it, no one can copy it, no one can modify, no one can do anything with it unless you approve it, right? So that's the basics of the that's how deep we're going to get to copyright law, right? So don't worry too much. My objective here is to say that open source, the most basic way to think about open source is that open source is a licensing scheme, right? You give some kind of permission to your software that allows other people to see the source code, modify it, improve it, and redistribute. It's very important, right? Open source allows people to redistribute your code. So, and so a lot of the discussion that we get into open source, right, is gonna start from that point, right? So that's why I'm starting with it, just to say that's not what we're gonna be looking at, right? Because so for a software to be open source, there is a set of definitions. We call the open source definition. There's a set of definitions that the license for the software has to follow for that open source to be for that license to be considered an open source license, right? And so there's many licenses that already exist. They're open source. They're approved by the open source initiative and all of that. So that's a discussion that usually when you talk about open source, people are going to have that discussion. What kind of license do I use? Is the license open source? It is not open source, etc. But from the point of view of the developer, right, that discussion is less important, because it's nice to know that a source code is open source, right? Because then that you have a certain number of rights to that source code. So that's awesome, right? So once someone says that it is this piece of software uses or is distributed under an open source initiative approved license, then you have all the rights of an open source project. So that's good. So that's the first thing that you should look in our project to see if you have that license. But you don't need to understand anything about licensing. That's why the open source initiative exists, to approve licenses, to say that is an open source license, that is not an open source license. And so you can feel confident that you have the rights you need. Make sense? But besides that, when you talk about career, right, the whole objective here is to discuss, how to grow your career by using open source, right? This thing matters a little less, right? It's important just for you to know that you're answering the right thing. But in reality, right, open source is way more than a licensing scheme, right? Open source is a way for us to collaborate together. I think that's the important part, right? So the licensing scheme just tells you, yes, you can collaborate on that project, right? Because once the project is licensed under an open source license, it means that you have the right to see the source code. You have the right, so you can learn from the source code, right? You have the right to modify the source code, right? So you can improve the software from that. And the most important of it, you have the right to redistribute that modifications, right? So those three things are the things that really help you build a community of people, right? And the reason why this is important is because, people can say, but I can buy a software from some company and I can buy the rights to see the source code. Many companies will give them, they give you the software and they give you the rights to see the source code. They sell it to you, right? Or some other companies, actually, they have a piece of code, and then you have the right to, they give you the source code to you for you to read it, but you don't have the right to modify it, and you don't have the right to redistribute it, right? You can always see it to see if it does what you need to be done, for example, right? For security purpose, for example, right? There's some other companies that say, but we have a process that if the company goes out of business, right, you have access to the source code, right? So they actually do this. They go to a bank, right? They put the source code into a bank, and they give keys to other people. That if the company goes bankrupt, those two people can go the key and open and have the source code, right? So you don't need the source code while we are in business, right? Because we can do things for you, right? But then when you're not in business, you have the source code, right? So all these are other ways that people try to give you access to source code, thinking that that's enough. But the reality is, the software is only useful to you if you have the right to modify it, right? But you have the right to work with other people to modify it, right? Because really, man, if you get a complicated enough piece of code, and you're the only person that can modify that, and you're the only person that can actually see that and modify it, how far can you get to that piece of code, right? You're not gonna make a big improvement unless you turn that into business yourself, right? So if you don't have the right to redistribute your modifications, that means that only you can see the source code, only you can make modification or edit. So yeah, we've seen lots of companies that say that. Oh, but no, don't worry about it, right? Our code is not open source, but you have the source code. So if you need to make fixes on it, you can. But can you actually? Are you going to have all those amazing developers working for you so you can fix a tiny little bug that you need, right? So that's why for us to have real freedom to work with the code, we have to make this a community effort, right? Because if I'm a user of that software, and Jim is a user of that software, and Vadi is a user of that software, so then so we can work together to improve the software for all of us, right? So this community building, right? This ability to work together with other people is one of the most important and fundamental things around open source. Make sense? And one interesting thing is that because of that, open source has a series of layers that I think is important for us to understand, right? So Simon Phipps, that used to be the chief open source officer from Sun Microsystems, he wrote an essay one time talking about those layers of open source, right? So basically, we have like maybe kind of 4 layers of open source, right? So in the inner layer, right, we have the core, right? I'm going to say the core committers here, right? CC for the core committers, right? So we have the core people that are actually working on the source itself. They're working on the software. So those are the guys actually creating the software itself, right? And so around it, right? Actually, I'm just gonna say, I said core here, but I think that's better to say developer. I think that's better, right? So we have here in the middle, we have the developer community, right? I don't remember exactly the name that Simon Phipps used in his essay, but I'm just gonna go with this, right? So we have the developer community. Those are the developers working on the code itself, right? Around it, right, we have what we call the extended developer community, right? So those are people that are also working on code, but working on code around the project, right? So those people are doing plugins, for example. They might be doing automation, right? They might writing code to integrate that software with something else, right? So they're not actually working on the core, but they're working around the core. They're developers working around the core of that software. Make sense? And then outside of that, we have another level, right? And so the 2 more inner levels are developers. The 2 more outside levels are users, right? So then we have the group of people that are they're users now. They're users, right? But they're more technical users, right? So let's say they're let's say the extended user community, let's say, right? So they're users of the software. So they're not actually writing code, but they are participating in the project in a more integral part of it. So those people, for example, they are installing the software in different places. They might be automating the installation of the software. They might be running tests. They might be doing translations of the code, for example, or translation of the documentation. They're working around in the project, right? But they're working more from a user point of view than from a developer point of view, right? So they're not actually developing the code, right? They're still very important to the project, right? And then we have the outer layer here, right? And those are the users, right? Okay, so those are people that use the software, right? So they're not, I mean, they might need to do something like configure the software for their own use, right? But they're not, so they're basically the user of the software. So this, if for any open source project, right, we have those 4 layers of open source participation here, right? And it's important for us to understand that, because when we talk about from a developer perspective, remember, the way I want to talk to you guys is from a developer perspective. From a developer perspective, when I say I want to contribute to open source, I want to participate in open source, I want to be involved in open source, we have to look at all the possibilities that we want to participate, right? So here, so that's the community. That's the community that's built around this commons, right? So in the middle of these layers, right, we have the commons, right? That's the source code that we all have access to. Make sense, right? So then, when you talk about, so when you build that community, when you actually start participating on that community, then you can get involved in any of those levels. And usually, the way it works is you become involved as a user, right? You're just using the software, right? You're just kind of, you're, and by the way, as a developer, right, you can be a user of software, right? For example, you're just using an API, right? You're using, right? You're not doing anything. I mean, you're not working on it. You're not changing it in any way. You're just using an API. So you are a user here too, right? But usually, when you're a developer, right, you're more in this inner circles here, right? Because even if you're just using an API, right, you have more condition to look how the API works, right, to extend the software somehow, right? Because when you use an API, you usually inherit an object, for example, right? You you implement a interface, right? You extend the API somehow, and then you become an extended developer community here because you're extending it, right? So as a developer, we very easy and very fast we fall into the more towards the core here, right? So the end here users would be someone, for example, maybe an end user using, I don't know, OpenOffice, right? Or maybe you as a developer using NetBeans or Eclipse, right? You might just be using it as a user, right? Although you could use it better because you're a developer. But as a developer, a lot of times we end up extending the software or implementing something with it, and so we become part of this core community. Okay, so once we have that idea here, right, on all those communities, and we think as we developers, and we are able to participate on this inner circle here, right, then we can start thinking about how this can actually impact our careers. So what are the things that we can do for ourselves? Because Jim said here one thing that I thought was very important. He said that you can be a little selfish, right? And I don't like to say that you're being selfish, right? Because really, we do have this. Actually, can I do a little sidetrack here? Because that's important, right? Okay, it's very, very important. So with this here vision, that's open source, that's code, right? But let me tell you, in terms of people, forget code for a minute. Let's tell you in terms of people. In terms of people, there's 2 types of people in the world, right? 3,000 people in the world, not 2. 3,000 people in the world from the point of view of giving, right? You have the givers, right? And every time we talk about open source, we usually talk about the givers. We have the givers. Givers are people that give more than they receive. They help people more than they're helpers, right? So those are the givers. And then from the other spectrum, we have the takers, right? Takers are people that they take more than they give, right? So they just use whatever they have that's available, but they give, they help little, right? So they're help it, but they don't help, right? And then in the middle of this, there's the matchers, right? So the matchers are the quid pro quo people, right? You know, I help you, Jim, because I know you're gonna help me, right? You know, and you know, I'll come here for the Houston User Group first because I know Jim's gonna help me here, right? So that's the quid pro quo people, right? They'll be like, okay. So the givers, matches, and takers, right? So one interesting thing I want to tell you is this. Those type of people. Come on, man. You're in the right time. Yes. So, oh, that's a pizza, Jim.
Awesome.
Right. Okay. Cool. Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So, so Jim's gonna decide if we're gonna make a stop for the pizza or not, but you decide.
Come back. Get it.
Yeah. So you tell me what you want to do. So, okay. So here's a very important thing, right? Inside an organization, right? The givers are the people that go up and they end up being at the top of the organizations, right? The givers are the people that grow more inside an organization, right? So you see this a lot, right? You see, you know, CEOs and CTOs of companies that they're very visible and they help a lot of people, right? So you see this a lot. So givers are the people that grow up in the organization, right? But that's not what we think, right? You know, we think a lot of times, you know, we see in the movies, for example, right? The nerd in the movie, the guy that helps everyone, he's not in the top of the organization, right? He's the bottom, right? You know, on the movies, right? Everyone step on the nerd, right? Everyone use the nerd to grow. And we see this a lot of times in our companies too, right? So the guy that helps everyone, he's always stuck in the same place. Because the givers are also the people that are at the bottom of the organizations. Right? And that's very important for the rest we're going to discuss here. So the givers, yes, the givers are at the top of the organization, but the givers are also at the bottom of the organizations. Why? Right? Really quick here, why? So here's what happens. Takers, it's very easy for you to see why takers don't grow, right? Because takers, they take more than they receive. So eventually, everyone around them will notice that, right? And so then everyone, givers and matchers, stop helping the takers. I mean, the takers don't help the takers, right? And so whenever people notice that you are a taker, they will stop helping you, right? And so then you stop growing because there's no one helping you and you can't grow ourselves, right? You know, you need other people, right? So takers don't grow because of that, right? Now matchers, you say, but Bruno, matchers are helping people too, right? But the problem with matchers is that matchers miss out on opportunities, right? So for example, Jordan is here's a good example, right? So Jordan, you know, he created a community. Last time I was here, right? I did not know that Jordan was going to create a community because he didn't, right? He created a community after I left, right? So last time I was here, Jordan was not a community leader. So Jordan could come to me and say, hey, Bruno, can you help me out? And I look at Jordan and say, no, I'm not going to help this guy out, right? He cannot help me. You know, he can't call me. It's not like Jim, they already have a community that he can call me and I can come and talk, for example, right? So I'm not going to help Jordan because he cannot help me right now. Now, what happens if I had done something like this, right? What happens that 5 months later, Jordan has a vibrant community. Now he can help me. So now I call Jordan and say, hey, Jordan, you know, I want to give a talk to your community. What's he going to say? No, right? I don't want you here, right? Because when I need your help, you are not willing to provide help to me, right? So that's what matchers end up losing opportunities, right? You know, a giver will help anyone all the time, right? So that means that I could help Jordan. And so Jordan went on and he built a community. So now he can help me back. But I was not expecting that return in the future, right? You know, he could not have created a community, right? I mean, he could, right? Or he could help create a community and never help me back. I don't care, right? So as a giver, so matchers miss out on opportunities because of that. Make sense? All right. So then givers are the people that have the most amount of opportunities. And again, givers are the top of the organization, but givers are also the bottom of the organization. So here's very important because I'm going to get you what Jim told about being selfish, right? Because I think that's very important for open source. So now, how to separate, what separates the giver that is that grows up in the organization from the giver that does not, right? How to separate between them. So the giver, there's two types of givers, right? So I'm gonna raise match and take because we don't care about those guys anymore, right? Okay? We all want to be givers, right? So there's two types of givers. One type is what we call the selfless giver. So the selfless giver is the opposite of what Jim was talking about, right? So it's a person that's not selfish, they're selfless, so they help everyone, right? So, but of course, givers help everyone because they're givers, right? But the selfless givers, here's how I say the selfless givers. The selfless givers, they only care about others. Sense? So selfless givers are the people that they only care about others, right? So basically what they do is that they pour themselves out, right? They do everything that everyone else does, right? Maybe it's you, right? It's like someone comes to you and say, hey Jim, can you help me out? Can you help me out of this report here? And then Jim's going to help the guy out with the report and gets to the end of the week, right? Everyone got the report done, their code finished, everything, and Jim is behind the schedule because he never finished what he has to do, right? So the selfless givers, the people that only care about others, right? So the problem with selfless, let me talk about the other.
They have a boundary problem.
They have a boundary problem, right? So then the other type of giver is what we call the otherish giver, right? So the otherish giver, right? The big difference is that he also cares about themselves, right? So it's not that they only care about themselves, they also care about themselves. So they do care about others, but they also care about themselves. Make sense? So it's a person that, yes, I help, remember, they're both givers. So they both give more than they receive, right? So they're both not selfish, right? Let's put it this way. But the selfless givers, because they only care about themselves, what happens is that they end up, they only care about others. They only care about others, right? They end up not caring about themselves, right? So they end up not doing what they need to do for themselves, right? Is a guy that, gets the end of the week, he helped everyone out, and he didn't finish his work. So now everyone's pissed off with him because everyone's gonna be late now because his code is not done, and no one else can do anything because he didn't finish his code, right? Is a guy that ends up on the weekends working overtime, right? So he cares so much about others that his family suffers, that his company suffers. This is the guy that is abused, especially by the takers, right? It's the guy that the taker comes to you and say, hey, Jim, can you do this for me? And Jim says, yes, I can. So Jim goes do that thing. The guy is going to do something else, right? And then at the end of the day, the guy has everything done because Jim did half of it, right? But then Jim didn't do anything because he didn't care about his own work. Make sense? So the otherish giver is a giver that also cares about himself, right? It's the giver that says, hey, Jim, can you help me out of this? And Jim looks and says, yeah, man, that is something that I love to do, that I'm working on, right? So yeah, let's sit down and do it together, for example, or yes, I can help you with that. But maybe there's something else. The guy says, hey, Jim, can you do this report here on this other project? And so Jim, no, I'm not part of this other projects. That's not part of the thing that interests me. I can help you, right? I can review what you did, for example, right? He's still gonna help, right? But he's not gonna be, it's not something that Jim is interested in doing, right? But he's still gonna be helping. I can help you. As Jim said, it puts some boundaries.
Yeah.
I love to talk about the others giver, right? Because one thing that people tell me all the time, right? And I love this. People say, Bruno, we have to learn how to say no, right? You heard that before, right? You have to learn how to say no. And every time someone tells me, oh, yes, you have to be a giver to learn how to say no. The thing I think is that, well, you have to learn how to say no because you don't want to say no, right? You want to say yes. You're helpful. You're a giver. You're a helpful person. You want to say yes, right? But you have to learn how to say no. You have to go against your will, against what you want, to learn how to say no. That's not it. You have to learn how to say yes, but. It's very easy, right? You always say yes, but say yes, but.
Or yes, and.
Or yes, and, right? But yes, but, I prefer yes, but, because it makes the boundaries more clear.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So say, hey, Jim, can you help me with this report? Yes, but it's not part of my work, this thing you want to do. I don't have a lot of time for it. I can sit down with you for 1 hour this week to help you understand what needs to be done, thing like this, right? Or, yes, I can help with this, but that's not my area of expertise. So let me call my friends, Elio, and I can introduce you to Elio, and you can ask Elio, how about that? Would that work for you, right? Or you can say, yes, I can help you, but how about you start doing it, and then you show me, and I'll tell you if you're going the right direction or not, right? Or yes, I can spend 5 minutes with you, understanding what helping you out, figure out what the problem is. And then so you put some boundaries, right? And then once you put some boundaries, you're still very helpful, and you can help even more people because now you're not being abusive. Make sense? Now you say, but Bruno, what if the guy asked me something? For example, what if Jim asked me something that, Jim is he's a good friend of mine, and he has such an awesome project about refactoring, and that's something that I want to do, right? Am I going to say, yes, Jim, but I only have 5 minutes? No, if that's something that you really want to do, you can help as much as you want, right? That's not a problem, right? I'm just so the difference. So here's important: the difference between selfless giver and the others giver is focus, right? The others giver have a focus. You know where you want to get. You know how far you want to go in your career. You know your objectives. So you're gonna help people, right? But you also gonna care about your goals. Make sense? So why I'm talking about all these? Because when Jim said in the beginning, and he said, in open source, you can be a little selfish and do what's important for you. Well, you don't need to be selfish to do what's important for you. You need to be a giver that's an others giver to do what's important for you, right? So then you do open source. Think about your focus. Think about something that's important for you. You don't do open source just to do open source, right? So what's the problem being a selfless giver? Because that has everything to do with open source. What is the problem being a selfless giver? Here's how the selfless giver work, right? You start helping out because you like to help, right? And people ask you things and you help out, and then you start spending a lot of time helping out and little time doing the things that are important for you. And then late at night, you're going to be doing the things that are important for you because you don't have time to do them during the day, right? Then your family suffers, and then you don't have time to do it right. The things that are important for you, you don't do them right. So they actually don't grow, they actually don't have results. And then you get mad, you get upset, you get tired, upset, mad, right? That things are going wrong, right? That you're not growing. That everyone else around you grow, but not you, right? And then eventually, what happens? You burn out, right? And burnout is such a common thing in our careers, right? It's terrible. Now, the problem is that burnout's not, oh, I'm doing lots of things. It's not, right? Because I can guarantee you, for example, that you go on vacation and you do lots of things. You spend a whole day, you get to the end of the day that tired, but you're not burnt out. No one says, oh, I burn out with the vacation, right? Unless you spend so much sun in the sun that you burn out, right? That's a different thing. But you don't burn out because you're tired. You burn out because you don't see the results of what you're doing, right? So you don't have a focus, you don't see results of what you're doing, and then you burn out. And so that's what happens to selfless givers. You burn out, but you get resentful. That's the word, right? Resentment is probably one of the worst sentiments you can have. Because think about what resentment is. I come to Jim, Jim's friend. I ask help to Jim, and he helps me, right? But then he's helping me because he's my friend, right? So he likes me. He's doing this because he's a good guy, right? And he's helping me out. But because he helped me out, he didn't get any results for him, right? So he's his family's suffering. He's at end of the night, still working on things. So he gets resentful towards me, right? Come on, if I didn't help Bruno, I could have finished this. Bruno's such a bad guy. I hate him now, right? So resentment is that you get your good feelings for someone and you revert that feelings into bad feelings. It's the worst thing you can happen to you. Resentment causes burnout, right? So you burn out exactly because you're so pissed off that you're helping everyone and you don't see results, that you burn out, right? So that is the problem that we have with community leaders, right? With open source developers, even if people inside the company, what happens? We stop doing it. We get resentful. And so what happens with a giver that gets resentful? They say, I need to learn how to say no, right? And so they become a taker. Maybe a matcher. It's hard for a giver to become a full taker, right? Because you're always trying to help, right? So maybe become a matcher, right? But then you stop being a giver because you're resented. So if you're a selfless giver, the end result is that either you burn out completely or you stop being a giver. So that's not a good path, right? And the worst thing that can happen for a community, for example, is that you get so mad about your community. They say, I'm doing so much time with this user group. I'm doing so much time with this side project thing that I'm not getting my work done. So I'm going to stop doing it, right? And then you stop doing it, and then the whole community dies out because you're not there anymore. And then, make sense? So what do? We become as others do, right? We find a focus. We find a result, right? We make sure we know which result we want. We make sure we know how doing the community is actually helping me, right? We make sure that we know that, yes, I have an amazing job today because I did the community thing. So it's actually improving my life. Improving, really, right? Right? So then you can start seeing really how helping others is helping you. And when you do, imagine that let's imagine every time that you build a community, every time that you put time in your community, let's be very blunt here, right? Just gotta use money as a thing, right? But let's imagine that every time Jim helps out the user group, right? Jordan helps out in his community, their salary increases, right? Would you help the community more? Of course, right? Because you see clear results, right? And so I keep telling people, for example, that imagine, for example, that you go to the event, right? And then you have to convince your boss you have to go to the event, right? So to give your time off, to pay for your expenses, right? But let's imagine that every time you went to an event, your company, increased their revenue by $1 million. Do you think your boss will want you to go to more events? Right? Of course, right? Because there's a reason, there's a result that is obvious. So another giver is someone that knows the results they want, right? And so they help people, yes, but they also see the value of helping. Make sense? Right? So why is it important for open source? Because open source is a giving thing, right? The first thing you're going to get to when we talk about open source, like why you're working for free for that company. Now, let's say you participate on OpenJDK, right? So that's a good question. Why are you working for free for Oracle? Oracle is such a big company, right? I mean, they could pay all the developers. So why are you spending your time, right, and working for free for a company that could pay you, right? And we see the same thing, for example, as speakers, right? Lots of events say this, I'm going to give a talk to your events. You're going to be making money out of my talk, so you should be paying me. Why I'm going to give this for free, right? You see what I'm talking about? So that's what happens when you're selfless. You get up to this point, right? Then you get mad that other people are profiting from what you're doing because you don't see results for yourself. So open source like this. So basically, if you are others giver and you participate in open source and it's clear for you why you should be doing this, what results you're getting, it's clear for you that participating in open source project, you grow in your career, what's going to happen? You're going to do more. You're going to contribute more. You're going to participate more. Make sense? So being an others giver, actually, that's very funny because we say selfless and we all want to be selfless, right? We say selfless and then we say otherish. So, oh, he also cares about himself. That's a question I get a lot. But Bruno, isn't an others giver the same as a matcher? No, it's not, because the others giver is not helping just because he sees the value of what the person is going to help him back. The others giver is also a giver. He's helping more than he receives. He's helping everyone, but he's helping with a boundary. He's helping with a focus on their own results, right? And actually, what happens in the end is the others giver gives more than the selfless giver, right? Because he never gets resentful. He never stops doing it. Make sense? So that's open source, guys. When you approach
Sustainable open source.
sustainable, that's a very good word, right? Yes. So basically, if you are others giver, you can sustain your contribution, right? You can participate. You can do even more, right? You can really do this for much longer period of time because you see the value for yourself. Make sense? So open source, right? It's first of all, for you as a developer, right? Open source is a great way for you to learn, right? So some results. Let's think about some results open source gives you for your career. It's a great way for you to learn, but not only learn. Oh, because I'm going to read some source code. No, it's a great way. Remember, open source is about doing things together in a community, right? So open source is great for you to learn from other developers, right? From developers that are better than you. You know, think about it. I'm going to use, who here knows who James Gosling is? Okay, some people don't know. So James Gosling is the guy that created Java, right? So he built the first compiler of Java. He's called the father of Java. So he worked for Sun. He was the lead of the Java specification for many, many years, right? So he was the main architect behind Java technology, right? So I'm going to use him a lot, right? Because I'm a Java developer, right? So James Gosling is a good example for us, right? So James Gosling, can you imagine if I could learn Java with James Gosling? Wouldn't be good? I mean, the guy created the technology, so if I could learn from him, wouldn't be a good thing? So I can. Why? Because Java is open source. So the source code is available. So maybe I cannot call James Gosling and say, hey, James, can I talk to me, right? Maybe I cannot do that, but I can go and see what he did. I can take a look at his source code. I can take a look at the trade-off that he made, right? I can see, I can learn things from the mistakes he did, right? I can see his source code, right? And so I can learn from other developers. I can learn from people better than I am. And it doesn't matter who we are. I'm sure there's always someone better than us, right? And so if I can learn with people that are better than me, that's going to be awesome, right? So that's one thing. That one, right? The other thing that open source gives us, right, is to be part of something, right? Be part of a community. Just be part of something, right? Because remember that we're talking about focus and we're talking about results, right? So when you're part of something, you see the value of what you're doing, right? And a lot of times, this is missing from our work. A lot of times we're doing work. So I don't know about you guys, but I work a lot for banks, right? For the financial industry, and a lot of very stressful projects with a lot of very short deadlines and all that. And many times the project gets canceled for time, right? And I'm sure you participate in some project like this, right? So you put in a lot of things, you don't see your family for several weeks, you don't have free time and everything, then the project gets canceled. Like, why am I doing this, right? It's like, come on, I don't see results. I don't see value in what I'm doing. But once you participate in open source, right, and you have people using the software you're doing, you have people, learning from you. You have people, you improving your own things, right? You see you're part of something, and that's amazing, right? And being part of something means I can say hello, hey Jim, hey Jordan, right? So I should, I'm part of your guys' community, so we can meet people, right? We can have friends, right? We have a purpose. Make sense? It's more than simply working on code. We have a purpose. And actually, there's one thing that I say to my mentees, right? And I say to them, and look, what I want is to get more friends. I say this. I say that's very true, right? I want, I always help my friends in my whole career. I always help my friends to grow their careers, right? And so I'm always looking for more friends, right? And when I say that, it sounds like, oh, Bruno, you're just saying this because you want to have more mentees, right? But the reality is that, I always thought that if we could work on things together, right? In the end, we become friends, right? Every time I come here to Houston, let's say get Jim, for example. I met Jim in events, right? So we were going to events, we met, and every time we see each other, we met again, right? And so we're doing something together, right? And then eventually, I start coming to Houston. Every time I come here, I meet Jim again, and I meet his family, and so then eventually what happens? We become friends, right? We're not just Bruno and Jim, like leader of user groups, right? I mean, we're friends, right? I know him personally. He knows me personally. He knows my wife. I know his wife, and it's like we become friends, right? And so, and the other day I was listening to this guy talking about it. He's saying that many people think that friends are people that we do fun things together, right? And yeah, there's a part of this is true, but he said that actually true friendship is to doing meaningful things together. And when I read that, I'm like, man, that's open source, right? That's exactly what this thing is, because if we have a result, if we're part of something and we're working together to do something meaningful, right? What happens with us? We become friends. Right? And so now not only you're learning from top developers, but you're part of a community. You become friends with top developers. What else could help you grow your career as much as this, right? If you're friends with James Gosling, you can, if you have a code problem or some difficult situation, you could call James Gosling because he's friends, right? And he would help you out. Wouldn't that help you in your career? Right? So that's what open source allows us to do. Right? To be part of something, right? And, but the thing I mentioned here many times, and I think that's the one of the most important, right? Allows you to work, right? Not only do fun things, but you work with people, with developers better than you, right? Man, software development, guys. It's I prefer to call software development art, right? Why I call this it has engineering, of course, right? The same way this architecture is an art but has engineering in it, right? So there is engineering in software, but it is more an art form than an engineer. What do I mean by that? Engineering, especially because you're an engineer, right? So maybe you can help me out with this. But engineering, right? Is you learn the best way of doing things, right? You learn, right? The right way of doing things. But there's no best way in software. There's no right way in software. Software it solves new problems. So it's always unknown, right? That's why software is so hard, so difficult for us to learn and master, right? So it's more like, if you see two paintings from different painters, which one is better? There's no right way of doing a painting, right? So software is like this, right? So of course, if you're a painter, right, and you're painting a masterpiece, you need to know a little bit of engineering. You need to know perspective. You need to know how the colors match with each other. You need to know things like whatever type of painting you're using that is going to last longer. I mean, there's some engineering you need to learn, but the work that you're doing is much more art then you, that's what I think software is. And how do you learn art? You always learn art with other people, right? You know, you don't learn art by yourself, right? You learn art with other people. And so that's because, and so that's what we need to, as software developers, we need to work with people that's better than us. You know, the big masterpieces are done by people that are working with other people, right? So, no, so you got the big masterpiece, and this guy learned it from this other guy, right? It's like, that's how it is, right? And so that's the thing. Software development, when you work with amazing people, you increase the chance that you become an amazing developer. Make sense? So open source allows us to do all that, right? Open source allows us to work with people that are much better than us, right? So the more we can participate on this, the better it's going to be for us, right? And with that regards, right? I want to do a few things here. Any question about this, Jim? Does any question online about this whole thing?
I don't think so. We did have some comments. One from Nikita saying that he's followed your advice and it's really changed his life.
Yeah. So thanks, Nikita. Good to have you here. Actually, right here, right? So thanks, Nikita. Good to have you here, man. And yeah, so Nikita's actually doing open source today, right? And so he's become a big giver, right? That he's and one of the things, you know, don't want to get too much in details, but Nikita did really change his life, and he was going through some serious trouble, and now he's not going through troubles anymore, right? Because he's participating, because he's helping people, because he's doing open source, right? So that's great. So thanks a lot, Nikita, for being here. Any more comments or questions? No?
That's really about it at this time.
All right, so guys, if you're watching us online, and you guys here too, feel free to ask questions, right?
He did say selfless OSS mentoring burned me out in less than a week. I need to be really careful.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's definitely worth mentioning.
Yes, right, exactly, yes. Yes, selfless, you know, you're being a selfless, you can really burn out, right? And burnout, and now one interesting thing about this is that some research shows that, for example, you get people that are burning out, they're so tired, right? They're doing lots of work, it's very, very hard. They're so tired, right? And, you know, and for them, many times, the way to solve that is not to do less, is to do more, right? Funny enough, right? You know, but to do more with a purpose, with a result, right? So for example, let me give you an example. There's this company that has, you know, people calling, volunteers calling to get as donation, right? I mean, it's terrible, right? You call to get donation, what do you have, right? No, phone hanging in your face, right? It's all the time. So you get lots of no's and very little yeses, right? And you have to keep going, So people burn out doing this. They get very tired, right? So they learned that by just bringing in, right? So for example, so that charity was a charity that helped kids, right? So just by bringing in kids that were helped by the money those people were raising, right? You know, it made them to see the result of what they're doing, made them so much happier that they actually increased the number of calls they were able to make, right? And being less tired, right? So seeing the results, guys, makes a big difference for us. That's why when you participate in open source, you have to be, as Jim said, you have to be a little selfish. Participate in open source that helps you grow. Participate in open source actually gets you what you want. You know, because if you don't participate in open source that gets you what you want, what happens then you're going to burn out and you're not going to continue. Jim?
Yeah, so there's a book by a guy named Dan Pink called Drive.
Okay.
And he talks about the three. Yeah, here from Wikipedia it says to motivate employees who work beyond the basic tasks. Pink argues supporting employees in the following 3 areas that will result in increased performance and satisfaction: autonomy,
right?
Mastery, and purpose.
All right. Okay, autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Mm-hmm. That book is Drive by Dan Pink.
Yeah, Drive's a great book, by the way, right? So let's make a connection between, because I love that. I love to make those connections with those things, because you read those books, right? Those books are awesome, right? But they don't connect with development, right? So let's connect, right? So Daniel Pink talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? Can you see open source here? or do I need to explain, right? You know, so what is autonomy? Open source allows you to work on whatever you want to work, right? You know, any project you want, right? So you're an engineer, you want to work on project, right? Just, you can work any project you want, right? So you can find engineer projects online and work on them, right? So, and by the way, because open source, you know, open source does not mean you can do anything you want, right? But you, oops, God, just gonna like this. All right, so so open source, because you know open source does not means you can do anything you want. But interesting enough, on open source projects, you don't have a boss, right? You know, let's say Jim has this project. What's the name of the project again, Jim?
Refactor first.
Refactor first, right? So you guys should check out Refactor first. That's Jim's open source project, right? So Refactor first is a project that analyzes your source code and sees where are the best things that you can do to refactor your code right now, right? So what are the hot spots of your code, right? So Jim did that software. So now if I want to participate on Jim's software, for example, right? I want to help him out with, Jim is not my boss, right? You know, I don't work for the same company that he works for. He cannot tell me, Bruno, go work on this, right? Because that's what your boss does, right? Your boss tells, no, you got to work on this. Jim cannot tell me what to work on, right? So I have full autonomy on how much time I'm going to work on this, how much effort I'm going to put, which part of the project I want to work on. It does not mean that I can just do whatever I want, right? Because it's a project. We have to be working together with a goal, right? We have to work together with a result in mind, right?
Yeah.
So we have to collaborate, but I have full autonomy to do things. Make sense?
Yeah, and in case in point, a software vendor type, they approached me and they, you know, and we collaborated and they said, hey, you know, we want to have some JSON binding. And could you do it? I was like, no, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll do it. You know, so right, and they did. You know, it was great, but I had to say, look, no, I'm sorry, I don't have the time for that.
Perfect. Yes. So that's another thing, right? You know, although you're on the project does not mean that you have to do everything everyone asks.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. You want that feature? Submit a pull request.
So they have autonomy to go do it themselves if they want
Exactly.
to, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So then mastery, right? Mastery. You know, if you're learning from the best, right? Or I'm not sure necessarily the best, but you're learning from people that are better than you, right? You're learning from people that are better than you. You're part of a team that's better than you, right? And so, you know, so does that make you increase your mastery? Yes, right? It gives you access to increase your mastery. And not only that, because there's so many open source code out there, you know, I have a good friend of mine that many of you might know, Adson Yanaga. So Adson, you know, he works for Google now. He used to work for Red Hat. He's like a top evangelist in the industry. So Adson, when he started his career, he needs to do things that he did not know how to do. So what he would do, he would look, which open source project does that? So he would look at the open source project and to see how they did it, right? So for example, I'll give an example that he tells in his talks. He said, you know, I need to build logging. And I was like, I don't know, what's the best way to do a good logging? I don't know. So I said, I'm going to look at Tomcat, right? Because we use Tomcat's log all the time to figure out what's going on with our web server, right? So maybe, you know, Tomcat's log are useful. So I want to create logs that are useful too, right? So he went on to look at how Tomcat did logging. So he implemented the same thing that Tomcat did on his own project, right? So that's increasing mastery. You learn from the best, right? You learn from other people that already had problems worse than you have. And open source allows you to do that, right?
I'll be the first to say that a fair amount of code that's in Refactor first, I copied from Stack Overflow.
Yes, right. Be careful copying from Stack Overflow, right? Because Stack Overflow, just copy and paste from Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow.
But yes, I modified.
Right, yes. So just be careful to not copy and paste. Because Stack Overflow, you have to take a look at the license of Stack Overflow. Just be careful of that.
Okay, good to know.
I don't know what the license of Stack Overflow is, but copy and paste code, make sure that you know what license you're talking about, right? Because then you might have some code in your project that you cannot license on the same license that you're licensed right now.
Okay.
So just be careful. So if it's a small snippet of code that copyright doesn't apply, that's okay.
Yeah, it's small. It was
Right.
small amounts.
Yeah. So no, but I'm sure even though if you're not copying, if you get your Stack Overflow answer, for example, and you learn what your guys are doing, right? You know, and then you do the same thing. That's all perfectly fine, right? So just copy and paste. Look, copy and paste, guys, is not very good unless you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
So, but you're right? You know, you learn things from Stack Overflow. You learn things from other people's code, right? And then you can apply in your code to see how it works, right? You know, so then purpose, right? You know, open source has a purpose. You know, the project has a reason to exist, right? It has a purpose, right? So that's purpose by itself, but even more than that, because open source is a code that's used by a big community. Anything that you do, anything that any effort that you put helps lots of people. And man, this is awesome, right? So the question in the beginning, there's a question in the beginning that we was just talking about it, but I can't start answer right now, is what is best, to do a code, to do my own project, or to participate in another project? For example, for purpose, right? Joining an existing open source project is better. Why? Because if you join existing open source project, the project already has a purpose, already has people using it. So it makes easier for you to just be part of something, right? It makes it easier for you to work with the developer running you. It makes it easier for you to be part of something, right? It makes it easier for you to learn from other people. So I think that's more powerful is for you to participate in projects that already exist for your career, right? But of course, you know, if you're like Jim, you're a very good developer, you know, you have an idea that no one else have, you try to look around, you never see anyone doing it, something, you just go and do it. And that's great, that's amazing, right? So that's what happened, for example, when we were moving from, I used to have my mentoring group on Slack, right? And so, but Slack has a problem, right? Because, you know, either you pay for it or, you know, you don't have access to old messages kind of thing. And so, so eventually, you know, because there's no way, you know, for me to pay for it, I would have to charge a lot more for my mentees, right? So it didn't work, right? So I decided to just kind of migrate to Discord, right? But I wanted to have all my history on Discord, right? And I was like, okay, so how can I do that? I'm sure there's a migration tool, right? So I look around, there's no migration tool. So, well, but you know, we can get all this, the history of Slack, right? But, you know, let's just migrate to Discord, right? So then there's no tool. So I start building a bot to import from Slack to Discord, right? And a friend of mine, Hugo, he called me and said, oh, I want to help you with that, right? So, you know, he ended up did most of the work himself, right? Because he got so interested about the topic, right? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, awesome, man. So he went on and did most of the work. But so anyway, but today, right, there is this open source project, right, that other people are using. So Hugo told me, I was last week I was with Hugo because we went to on 10 cities in Brazil giving talks together, right? Me and him, Karina, and my daughter, right? So so we were talking about this project that he has in Bruno. Every week I got people asking new features, or people submitting ideas, or, you know, people telling me that they're using the code, right? So you get, when you start a project that's useful, there are people needing it, right? Then you also get the same sense of purpose, right? Because then you see other people using it, you see other people benefiting from it. But, you know, it takes longer for you to see the sense of purpose, because then you have to do a lot of work to get. Now, one thing that I tell you, a lot of people say, I'm going to do myself in open source because then other people can help me out. And many people start their project without anything, right? Just expecting there's going to be this influx of people coming in and just kind of lifting your project out of the sea, right? And does that happen, Jim?
Yeah.
No, right? So when you start an open source project, 99.99% of the work you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then you might have someone comment on something, right? You might have someone help you out a little bit, but normally very few people do participate in an open source project. See, you know, that's the community, right? This community here, the users community is very big many times, right? You have, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people using the project, right? And even that case, the core developer community is very small, right? You know, how small? let's talk about, for example, one project that I have a good friend of mine that became a committer of that project. So I helped him out through the whole process, right? So Bootstrap. How many of you have heard of Bootstrap, that front end of application? Okay, everyone has. Okay, good. So Bootstrap is a project that has a huge amount of users, right? Millions of people probably use Bootstrap, right? Their project, right? But the core committers, I don't know how much is right now, but at the time that Andres Galante, my friend, joined the project, there are 9 people. 9. Right, so the core community is 9 people, right? For millions of people that use it, right? So yeah, so usually you have a small amount of so yes, when you do an open source project, remember that it's not this influx of people coming to help you, right? It's even if the project is very useful, even if lots and lots of people use it, the ratio between people that use and people that develop, it's crazy small, right? So for example, you have OpenJDK, right? I think OpenJDK has a total in the whole history of the project, about 2,000 people have done something in it, right? But then, you have more than 10 million developers in the world, right? Java developers in the world, right? So, those are the users, right? Of OpenJDK, for example, right? So, so even a very, very big project like Java, that's a reality. Make sense? Okay, so one more thing I want to talk to you guys about. So Jim, how do we gonna do with pizza?
Oh, I'm just gonna take and eat some. As come and go. I mean,
so anyone? So if you wanna, just let you know then. So pizza's there, right? So if you want to get pizza,
please make sure don't go hungry.
Yeah,
we have plenty of food.
Okay, cool. So
how about you too, Bruno? Make sure you eat.
That's okay, no problem. So can you get me a glass of water?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool, thanks. All right, so I'm gonna continue here. I know time-wise, how are you doing time-wise? Questions here, guys? Questions, comments on this here is all good?
So say you can help you in a career, like by learning and meeting new people, and also you can put that into your resume, right?
Right, that's true too. Yeah, so that's the next thing I'm gonna talk about, how the biggest benefit of open source. Yeah, so but you're right. Open source is something, so let me kind of answer your question about resume, right? So on your resume and your curriculum, you put in the resume and your curriculum everything that you do, right? You don't put everything you learn, but you put everything you do. Thanks a lot, Jim.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man.
You are welcome.
That's very important. Oh man, perfect. You didn't put, I forgot to ask you to not put the cold water, and you didn't bring cold water. It's perfect, man. Oh, because that helps the throat, right? Perfect. Thanks, Mal. So one thing that is so in terms of curriculum, right? So what you put in your curriculum is what you do. No one is interested in what you learn, right? You don't put in your curriculum, oh, those are the books I read, right? Or even the course you took. You only put the course you took if you're very junior, right? Now, I took a course on I don't know, on Java E or Jakarta E. I took a course on the Jakarta E, right? You don't put that course because unless you're so junior, you don't have any experience, and then you can put something that you learn. But usually no one cares about what you learn. People care about your skills, right?
And your deliver.
Sorry?
The value you can deliver.
Right. So people care about your skills, right? And your skills are the things you did, right? So if you put in a resume the things that you did. So for example, part of an open source project, you did things, right? You wrote code, you commit things, right? You participate. So the things you did, yes, you can definitely put on your resume, right? And Jim is right. It's important for you to show the value, right? So that's another mistake people make when they do the resume. They kind of say, oh, I worked for this company, then work for this other company, then work for this other company. And I don't care which company you're working for. I care what you did in each one of those companies. So a lot of times people miss this opportunity to put the things that they make a difference in the company, right? So I worked for this company and, I implemented an algorithm that made the code twice as fast, right? Oh, I worked for this other company here and, I reduced the time that we deliver software from 3 months to 2 weeks, right? I work for this other company here and, we reduced the time for for the build from 1 hour to 15 minutes, right? You know, or whatever, right? So then, those three things, they might look very different, but all of them are things that shows I'm a performance specialist, right? Because, you know, every project I participate at, my job is to make things faster, right? So then, you know, all those things look like very random ones, but they're not, right? There are things that performance, someone focused on performance could be talking about, right? So yeah, so show the things, show the results you gave. So same thing with open source, right? So you're gonna put your open source resume, tell what you did. You know, and a lot of times this does not necessarily mean that you wrote code for the main project. It means I wrote plugins for it, right? You know, I fixed the bugs. You know, I translated documentation. All of these important things that you did for a project and they count. Make sense? Right? So yes, it's a good thing. All right. So let me just erase it really quick here. Any more questions? Why don't we raise the board here?
So, see, Nikita says, how do you find quality projects that matter? Maybe say go and fork Microsoft Java, make it build locally. And if you post your experience and share, and then I can say open JDK community member to your CV. It's like magic.
Yes, you know, I mean, some of those big projects, right? They're very visible. If you're able to put your participation on one of those big projects in your resume, that is indeed like magic, right? Because it creates a lot of credibility for you immediately. But my point here is not to talk about CVs, right? I want to talk about more interesting things here than CVs, because there's much better ways to get a job than a CV, right? I just want you to understand.
It helps you get an introduction. That's it.
Right. Okay. So, here's the most important thing for us here to get this here that I want to talk about, right? So the best thing the best thing the open source can help you is to build a reputation, right? This is one of the most important things in our career, guys. Reputation makes all the difference, right? So what is reputation, right? Reputation is what people believe about you, right? So when people believe that you're the right person for their projects, when people believe that you're the right person to solve their problems, they want you. Make sense? So your reputation, guys, is the thing that's going to get your career growing the fastest, right? So very few things are as important as reputation in your career, right? This is the thing that everyone wants. Everyone wants to get that, and that's the thing that's going to get you the most amazing number of jobs. Why? Because the best position in the market are offered to people that have good reputation. You know, how does that work? Well, it works very simply. You know, if I have a job, I have a position in my team, right? And I want to fill out that position. What I'm going to do, I can request resumes and then get lots of people that don't even know what I do, right? Or I can call the people that I know are good developers, right? And so that's kind of obvious, right? I know we do this all the time, right? We call people, but let me get you an idea of how this really works. Let's say I work for Jim, right? And then let's do it the other way around so I can point to me more. So let's say Jim works for me, right? So Jim works for me, and Jim saying, Bruno, you know what? The guys from Improving, man, just made me an amazing offer. I'm gonna work in the job that's the dream of my life, man. I'm leaving. So come on, Jim, don't leave me. No, I'm gonna work for Improving, man, and that's awesome. There's nothing you can do, right? You know, Improving is gonna be, there's nothing you can do for me to stay. Okay, cool. So I said, when are you leaving? Oh no, it's gonna take a couple of months for me to close things there, but I'm just letting you know. Okay, cool. All right, so now I'm the only person in the planet, right, that knows that I have a position in my team, right? You know, look, Jim is my friend, right? He's telling me he's gonna leave, right? So I cannot just immediately go to HR and say, yeah, let's fire Jim, right? So, you know, I need Jim to take the position to go to HR and say something, right? So I'm the only person that knows that Jim is leaving. So I'm the only person in the planet that knows there's a position in my company, right? And so I can say, so Jim, do you have anyone in mind that could replace you? And Jim says, yeah, I have this good friend of mine, Alio, right? Alio, worked with him before, right? He gave talks in my user group. He knows exactly what I can do here. You can just hire him. Okay, so now I call Alio. I say, hey, Alio, Jim is leaving. Would you like to work for me? And Alio says, what kind of job is this? I say, oh, it's a great job, man. It's fully remote, pays a lot of money, right? It's awesome things to do, very new technology. It's a great project. Do you want to work for this, Alio? Sure, right? Okay, so now, even before the position exists, Alio already accepted because he had a good reputation with Jim. Not with Word, right? With Jim, right? Jim knows him, right? So now, that position it's never going to exist. It's never going to show up on the internet, right? It has just been filled before it was even open. It's filled, right? Now imagine what happens if, same story, Jim says, talk with Alio, and I call Alio, and then Alio says, what kind of job is this? Oh, it's a very good job, man, but it's fully in person. You cannot work remotely. The pay is not very good, right? And you're going to be working with very boring technologies, right? So do you want to work for me?
Say I'm not Gene's friend.
Right, yes, no, right, yes. Yeah, so maybe Jim should not have suggested me, right? Yes. All right, so no, I don't want to. So then Anna doesn't want. Then I call Jordan. Jordan says no. Then I call Karina. Karina says no. And then, so then what happens to that position? It goes on the internet. Right? That's why, you guys can search for this later. That's why the research shows that up to 75% of the positions are in what we call the hidden job markets. They're hidden. There's no way for you to find out. They don't exist, right? And so because of that, if you see a position, you send your resume, you're already off 3 of every 10 positions, 7 of every 10 positions that exist.
I can test mine on that.
Right.
My last 4 jobs, I just got a call and someone said, yeah, we're gonna have this position, and then.
Yeah. Right. Very normal. Very normal. So with that, what do you need to get the most amazing jobs in the industry? No.
Networking.
I say 75%, right? But 75% for all jobs, right? But the most amazing job, the one that you want, right? Working on amazing companies, the most amazing jobs is more than that, right? If you just get the subset of the most amazing jobs, it's like maybe 90%, right? Of them are hidden, right? So if you want one of the real good jobs, you have to have reputation. You say networking. But network is a part of it, right? Because it doesn't help that you have networking, but you don't have reputation.
True.
Right? You might know a lot of people, but if they don't believe that you're a good person, right? Remember the reputation, what people believe about you, right? So if you know a lot of people, but they don't see you as a good developer, you're not going to get an offer as a good developer. Make sense? So people need to have your reputation as a good developer, right? That's very important. Reputation as a good developer, if that's what you want, right? So, I can give an interesting example, right? I have a very big reputation as a community leader, right? Because I don't do a lot of things in terms of, because that's what I do. I help developers grow their careers. That's what I've been doing since I started in my career, right? So all of my visible things are community things. Right? The fact that I worked on some of the biggest Java projects in the world, very few people know about that. So my reputation is as a community leader, and it's not as a developer, right? So I get a lot of calls for community leadership positions, but not a lot of calls for developer positions. Because I view my reputation as a community leader, not as a developer. Make sense? So why? Because reputation, reputation, what people believe about us, reputation has everything to do with trust. It's not the same thing, but it's similar, right? If I believe that I believe that you're a good developer, if I believe that you can do the job, I trust you, they can do the job, right? So reputation, trust is important. Now, reputation, trust in what? In what you're visible. Visibility. Visibility is fundamental. There's no reputation, no trust if I don't know you. I cannot trust you if I don't know you, right? So Vadi is here, and I met him today. He said he's an engineer, right? And that's all I know from him. How can I trust him to do something if I don't know who he is, right? But then he went on and said, I've been working for 15 years in the petroleum industry. All right, so now I trust Vadi in what I know about him in the petroleum industry, right? Because he's been working on 15 years in that industry. So even though I know him very little, I can say I trust him in the petroleum industry because he's working there. Make sense? So that's a little bit of visibility that I have from him. Same thing that I was talking before, right? So people see me as a community leader, right? So I got trust and I got a good reputation on the things that I have visibility. What this has to do with open source, right? Everything, because open source gives you visibility. It's open source, right? So your codes, your software is visible. People know what you do. People know what you're good at. I can point you, just go to my GitHub account, right? So that's what Jim can say. You want to know if I'm a good developer? Just go to my GitHub account and see if I'm a good developer or not. See what I did, right? So you're visible, right? Because you're visible, you can build trust in your reputation. But more than that, remember that open source is a community effort, right? So everyone in the team knows you, right? The developer working that code, they know who you are. They know what you do. They know how good you are. So that you're totally right, Tim. For you to get a good job, for you to have a good reputation, you have to have network. You have to have people that trust in you because they know you, right? So open source gives you that. So there's a group of people around you that know who you are, know how good you are in that regard. Make sense? And you don't need much more than that, right? Because if you're working on open source projects and you don't have a big network, because people say, oh yeah, you have to have a big network. But you don't have to have a big network. Let's say you want to work on Java. You want to be a Java developer. You want to be like one of the top Java developers in the world. And you participate in open JDK projects. So then it's just a group of people, maybe a few hundred people know who you are because you're part of the project. Right? So it's a very small group of people. But if any of them needs to hire a Java developer and they know you, who are they going to hire? You, because you're participating in the OpenJDK project, right? And so, let's say we're working on let's say Alio started working on Jim's project, for example, right? So, Jim has how many people help you in the project? Like 100? 12. There's 12 people working on the Jim project. Right? Let's say one of them is Alio. Now Jim needs to hire a developer for his team here in Proving, right? He knows Alio. He sees Alio's code. He knows he's a good guy. So Jim can, even Alio only knows 12 people, right? It's not a big network, but he knows the right people, right? Especially if Improving says, Jim, we love your project, man. We really want to invest because we're gonna use it on our biggest customer. We need to hire someone that knows your project. Who's going to suggest, right? Jim's going to say, well, I have 12 people on my project. I'm going to suggest any of them, right?
They all contributed. They're not, ongoing
Right.
contributors.
I'm just using, yeah, don't worry, right? But, that's what I'm saying. So Jim knows those 12 people well because, so now we're talking about a project, a small project, right? But imagine if you're working on something like OpenJDK or Jakarta EE or Spring, right? And then how many companies need Spring developers? How many companies need Jakarta EE developers? How many companies need Java developers? You can say, look, I'm one of the 2,000 developers that build the Java machine, right? So that builds reputation for you, right? And that gets you to the most amazing position. Make sense? All right. So that's another thing that open source is awesome for us, right? Now, so Jim, let me just do a time check again.
Yeah,
So
sure. We got 6:15.
6:15.
6:15. Yep. So
So we started about 5, right?
yeah, 5. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so how long are we gonna go here? Because I
we-
need to give time to finish.
Yeah, sure. I reserved it till 8:30, so we still.
I'm not sure if
have
everyone's
two
gonna be
hours.
here at 8:30. Okay.
Yeah,
so-
no, that's okay. However long you wanna stick around with.
All right, so let me do this. Here what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the 3 steps for you to apply open source, right? For your career, right? And then so when I finish this, the last for the 3 steps, the last of the 3 steps is gonna be deliver code, right? And so then Elio can come here and talk about code delivery and talk about chaos developments, right? And that has everything to do with that. And then we come back here to talk about all these kind of skills that you need for open source. Is that good?
Sounds great. So
Okay.
take a break.
Yeah, so let me just finish this.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Then we
cool.
can take a break, we can eat something and then come back.
Sounds good.
with that,
Cool.
okay?
Sounds
Okay,
great.
so yeah, a few more minutes here. All right. So so here are the three things that you can apply, right? To actually get this, to get your career growing, that open source helps you a lot, right? Well, actually, let me just kind of quickly say one thing because it has everything to do with just said here. So when I say this kind of thing here, right? So reputation gives you a job. The one thing that people tell me, yeah, Bruno, but that's not true in some of the big companies, right? You know, Amazon and Google, you know, those guys require all kinds of resumes and interviews, you know, so those.
It's a test.
Yes, yeah, all kinds of tasks, right? And whiteboard tasks and all kinds of things, hard questions, right?
Stump the chump.
Yeah, right. So all those kind of things, right? So those companies require that. And the answer is yes and no, right? So yes, they do require those things, right? Why? Because they have so many people applying for them that they can require those things and people just gonna do it, right? But I want to ask you one question, right? So Amazon and Google are the 2 companies I hear most that, oh, you have to do all this kind of testing to be accepted. Those are the 2 companies I hear most. So I've mentioned here James Gosling before, right? So the guy that found the job, right? So James Gosling was working for Oracle. He left and he worked for a company that does autonomous ships. Pretty cool project, by the way. And then from that company, he worked for Google, and now he's working at Amazon. So James Gosling working for just 2 companies. Now my question to you guys is, do you think that James Gosling, the father of Java, had to go through whiteboard coding and stupid questions to be hired for Google and Amazon? Right? I don't think so either, right? I don't know. I might be proving wrong, but I don't think so either, right? I think the other way around. If Google or Amazon told him, hey, James, come in for a set of interviews because we're going to put some people in our team asking you questions about, you know, if you should use a round, why the main holes are round, right? So I think he's going to say, no, I'm not interested, right? Or if they send, you know, I'm not sure if you guys seen the email that those companies send you, all the preparation you need to do for an interview, right? If someone sent that email to James Goss, say, James, you have to prepare for the interview. Here's the thing you need to do before coming here. He's just going to say, no, I'm not interested in working for you guys, right? So James it's you know, it doesn't prove that those companies don't do those things, right? It just the other way around. It just shows that for certain levels of amazing positions, right? It's a different hiring process. I just want you guys to understand that. It is a different hiring process, right? So, and you can put yourself in what I call the acceptance process, you know? So, in the process, the companies want to hire you. So I keep telling this all the time. And then, the reason why HR doesn't like to say that kind of things, right? Because it sounds like favoritism. You know, well, if I'm going to hire Jim because I know Jim, but I'm going to put Elio through the crazy hiring process, right? Then I'm favoring Jim. So it does not look very good for HR, right? But yes, I'm favoring Jim, not because I know Jim. It's because I trust Jim. Right? It's not only because I know him, it's because I trust him. And trust, guys, trumps everything. If I trust you the right person to do what I need you to do, why am I'm gonna try to find someone through a crazy process, right? Because if I already trust you, right? So trust is important, right? So HR doesn't like to talk to mention these things, but it happens all the time. That's the main way. Now, 2 weeks ago, Inc. published, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago, but I saw it 2 weeks ago, right? So 2 weeks ago, I saw an article in Inc., right? The magazine, right? The title of the article was something like the secret process that Google and other big companies use to hire the best talents. Why it's secret, right? It's secret just because no one talks about it, right? But it's not secret because everyone does it, right? And so they go on to explain what? To explain that on their open source projects, they hire the best talent. They're already working for them, right? You know, I got in my book, I wrote a book called Best Developer Job Ever. And that book, I tell several stories of this kind of thing. One of the stories is Daniel. So Daniel got a call one day from a company that says, I want to hire you. And Daniel said, no, I don't want to work for you. And then the guy was, so the guy that called, come back to his boss, says he doesn't want to work for us. And the boss said, no. Something is wrong. Call him again and find out why he doesn't want to work for us. So they called the guy again, say, hey, Daniel, why do you want to work for us? And he said, look, you're offering me an international job to work for an international team, right? And I don't know English, right? So come on, guys, if you send a resume to a job and you don't have a mandatory requirement, what happens? You get rejected, right? You don't have a mandatory requirements, rejected. That's the rejection process, right? Now, this case, the guy said, I don't have a mandatory requirement for your job. I cannot work for you. You know what the guys told him? Said, look, we're gonna send you an English teacher to your house every day to teach you English, but you're gonna work for us, right? And so they paid that, and he said yes. So they overcome a mandatory requirement because they wanted him. Now, why they wanted him? Because one day the boss of the project was looking at the GitHub account and he asked, hey guys, who is this Daniel guy here? And the guy said, oh, it's a guy that helps us out. He's from Brazil. And I said, okay, we need to hire him. I just found out that he has done about 70% of our mobile app. So this guy's already working for us, right? Call him on the phone, get him to work for us. There's no interview process, nothing, just get him to work for us, right? That's reputation, that's visibility, that's trust. That's what open source allows you to do. Make sense? Right? And so this kind of things, guys, is totally doable in open source. And that is the secret those companies don't tell you. You know, they don't tell you that 75% of their positions are not available, right? And worse than that, I've came all the way from Brazil to a company here in the US to be interviewed. I had a full day on their offices talking to top director of their company, right? And you know, had all kinds of interviews, and I got rejected, right? And the person they hired had already worked with and came from the same company that the hiring guy was hiring from. So the guy that was going to be my boss, that's, you know, if I was accepted, right? The guy's going to be my boss. He had just come from another company like 2 weeks before, right? And so he hired a guy that he already knew from his previous company. So I was in the rejection path, even though they called me, even though they offered the job, even though I was recommended by the president of that company in Brazil, even all of that, right? I just got a call, man. I was not looking for a job. I got a call. So it looked like I was in the approval process. But I was not, because the guy who was hiring had someone else in mind, right? But Roberto, how does that work, man? You know, the company was already talking to another person, right? Because that's how it works. So I'm not talking about Sun Microsystems, because we can mention Sun, right? I'm not gonna say names of the companies I'm just mentioning here, but I can talk about Sun. So Sun Microsystems doesn't exist anymore, right? So I was when I was hired as the community manager for NetBeans, at the time, the most important open source project Sun had, right? You know, Java had just been announced as open source, right? NetBeans was the big open source project that Sun had. I was hired by Sun, and actually, I officially started working 1 week after Java was announced as open source, right? So I even joke with people, so now I can say I come back for Sun because you open source Java, right? Because that was the thing I was doing, try to get Sun to open source Java. So, but anyway, so I was invited to work for NetBeans. I discussed with my future boss for 4 months. 4 months back and forth negotiation. She wanted me to do some things. I want to do different things. You know, I asked her too much money, right? So she didn't have that budget to hire me. We went back and forth. In the end, she was able to join both NetBeans and Open Solaris teams. Those two teams together were able to hire me, right? And so then I had to accept that it's going to work for both teams. So there's all kinds of negotiation. 4 months negotiating. So then she calls me one day, Bruno, yes, all good. We got everything. You're hired, right? It's all good. It's perfect. And so next day, she calls me and say, early in the morning, I mean, mid-afternoon for me, but early in the morning for her, right? She calls me and says, Bruno, we're gonna have a NetBeans, meeting with all the team in Prague. Can you be there tomorrow? I'm like, no. That's like mid of the afternoon for me now, right? There's no way I can get ready to travel tonight, right? To Prague. There's no way. But I can travel tomorrow, right? So I can be there on Saturday. Is that good enough? I think I could be there Friday. So yeah, so I think it was a Wednesday, right? So I could be there Friday, not on Thursday, right? So she said, okay, so here's the phone number. Call this person to get a ticket, right? So you travel. So come here, everything's set. By the end of the day, her end of the day in San Francisco, and I was early night for me. She called me again and said, Bruno, pay attention to this. I was ready to travel to Prague. I had tickets to Prague. So she calls me and said, Bruno, HR has just put your position online. Can you please go there and submit a resume? Right? Look, that was the position for NetBeans Community Manager. One of the most important open source project for Sun at the time, right? International position, amazing salaries, awesome thing to do, right? Lots of traveling, lots of cool stuff, lots of events, right? You know how many people wanted that job, man? You know, I got friends of mine that called me and said, Bruno, do you see that position? Right? It looks made for you. You should apply. Right? I had friends of mine that called me and said, Bruno, do you think I could apply for that position? Do you think I have a chance? But the position, guys, did not exist. Did not exist. Because it was already filled. Right? I mean, I was already traveling to Prague. I can tell you this. I don't know how many people submit the resume for that position, but I know how many resumes my boss read. I know it's 0. She never read any of them, right? Not even mine. I can guarantee that she never even read my resume, right? You know, she had no point in evaluating anything. And look, I'm not saying that I was the best guy ever, right? You know, this kind of positions, man, there could be other people that are better than me for that position, but that's not the point. The point is I was the person that was trusted enough to be part of the process before the process even existed. Make sense? So that's why HR doesn't want you to tell this, because it sounds bad, right? You know, so So that's why it's a secret. I mean, it's a secret that's being published in ink, right? So what secret there is in this, right? There's no secret. Everyone does that. You know, your companies does this, I'm sure, right? You do this in your project, I'm sure, right? But when we gonna apply to a job, we don't think the other person does that. But you know, that's how it works, right? 75% of jobs are feel like this. Now, so what is the secret that those companies have to apply to hire the best talents? They go to their own open source projects and they look at who is working on those projects and they give a call. So here's the secret, guys. I like my 5-step process for amazing jobs, right? Not a process, but my 5-step idea for amazing jobs, right? So if you share what you know, so you become visible, right? So if you share what you know, other people know what you know. And when other people know what you know, they trust you in what you know. And when they trust you in what you know, when they need what you know, they call you and not someone else. That's the secret for most amazing jobs. And that's the secret that those companies use, right? They say, look, I trust this guy that's working for me on an open source project, right? And because I trust him, I'm just gonna call him to that position. And open source, guys, gives you visibility because everyone knows that you're working on that project. It's visible, right? Even if you don't advertise, you know, everyone on their project knows that you're working on their project. Make sense? Right? So open source, guys, is the best thing because you learn from the best, you work with the best, you network with the best, right? I mean, not the best overall, but the best people that you want. Right? Because remember, focus, right? You have to decide what kind of thing you want to do. So if you want to be hired as a top developer in an engineering project, you go look for an engineering project you can participate today, even before you learn how to develop. Because there's many things you can do in open source projects because you know you're an engineer, you know about it, right? So you know the petroleum industry, you know the open source project that those guys use, you know the open source project that they create, you know the challenge they have. So you know open source projects have the same challenges. So when you join one of those projects, you can give your knowledge to those projects. You can evaluate the project. You can find problems. You can find you can suggest modifications because you can do that. And then you get to know people that are developers on those projects, and they start trusting you. Make sense? And then when they trust you, then they hire you and not someone else. And that's true for more things than only software development, guys. You know, get Lego, for example, right? Lego build a website for you to submit design of Lego, Lego, the little brick things, right? The toy, right? So Lego built a project that you can submit your own designs. And then the idea of the site is if you submit your design and lots of people vote for your design, they will productize your design and you get a piece of it, right? But very, very few project has ever got that level, right? Very few, because it's expensive for Lego to do that, right? So very few projects got to that level of being productized. But many people that submitted their designs were hired by Lego to be Lego designers.
Wow.
Right? Because, I look at this project, this awesome design, right? I need a designer for Lego. Why am I going to look for someone else if I see this design right here, right? So Lego used that to hire. So that's the secret those companies use to attract the right people for them and hire the best, right? Make sense? So, and that's a trick that they don't like to talk about it because it sounds like you're bypassing their process, but you're not. You're actually working for them before they need you. So when they need you, why are they going to hire someone else if you're already working for them? Make sense? All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap out here so we can finish. Yep. So here's the 3 things we're going to talk about. I'm just going to mention it, and you're going to do a break. 3 things, the 3-step process that you can apply to open source projects to become an amazing developer. Right? There's 3 things you can do because there's 5 main skills for a developer. Right? 5 main skills. So I'm going to talk about the 3 skills that make you a developer, right? And how open source can help with that. So the 5 main skills for developers is very simple. 3 skills make you a developer is read code, write code, and deliver code, right? Those 3 skills make you a developer. They're not the most important ones, but they get you in the game. The 4th skill is the most important one. That's solving problems. We are developers because we solve problems by reading, writing, and doing code, right? That's what makes us developers. And there's a 5th umbrella skill that is not the most important because the most important is solving problems. And it does not make you a developer because what's making you a developer is skill number 1, 2, and 3, right? But it's the skill that helps you grow more your career. That is share what you know. Because when you share what you know, you get visibility, you get a reputation, you get trust, and that gets your career growing, right? So if you do those 5 skills every single day, you're gonna grow, right? So read, write, and deliver code. That's what we're gonna talk right after the break, right? Because I'm gonna be here with Scott. Scott's gonna show you how you can read and refactor code on open source projects in a good way, right? And also Elio is gonna talk about his project about one of the things that you can do to deliver code amazing. Make sense? Question?
I just noticed a question on here. I'm not sure if I saw it, Jim. How can graphical designers, you know what? How can graphical designers find projects to contribute? Was asking this. Yeah, question.
Yeah, yep.
I can finish that. I got a great story about graphic designers. A great story, right? One of the best stories ever. Seriously, this story by itself is one of the stories that get me, because that's what we're going to talk about next, right? I'm going to show exactly what this guy did next. After those guys talk, I'm going to come back to show you a few things. So I have a mentee. His name is Andres Galante. So when Andres came to talk to me, he had a big dream of participating in an open source project. He thought it was impossible for him to participate in an open source project. And so, and why he thought it was impossible for him to participate in an open source project? Because he's not a developer. He's a designer. Exactly that question, right? He's a designer, right? So, and so Andres made a plan for in 12 months to become one of the top 100 contributors to Bootstrap, because Bootstrap is an open source project, has everything to do with design, right? So he made a plan to be one of the top 100 contributors. So then I started working with him to actually make the plan a reality. And I said, we're going to make it a lot faster than you think, right? Because, doing the right way, we can do. So in 3 months, Andres became number 48 on Bootstrap, right? In 4 months, right? In 30 days, Andres became number 48 on Bootstrap. In 3 months, Andres became one of the 9 committers of Bootstrap. I still remember Andres is a tall guy, right? Very thin and tall. And I still remember him on Java 1, on one of those big corridors, Java 1, with these big arms like this. Bruno, today I can break the internet, right? Because he could commit something and break the internet, right? So Bootstrap is one of the most amazing projects, and it's a design project, guys. It has development in it, of course, but it has design, right? So yes, there are a lot of cool designing projects. There's anything that you want to do. Remember, everything in the world needs software. So anything that you do has design. Any design has software. So there's open source software around it. And so yes, you can participate in lots of things. We're going to come back to that question, but yes, Andres is a good example. So Andres, now here's the career part. Because Andres became a committer of Bootstrap, his career exploded. Every company wants him to work for them, right? So he became the leader developer of OutZero, right? It's a full international company, no office. So he was leading the whole development team. And then he went on, he's also leading the development team of Hero. There is a cryptocurrency company now. And he said, Bruno, I'm making a lot of money right today by doing this, right? And he's not even a developer, right? He's a designer that he used in open source to grow his career a lot. Make sense? So yes, thanks for the question. Whoever asked it.
And it was Makita, and so Makita was also wondering what specifically did this person contribute? Was it did he actually contribute code?
Yeah, he did contribute lots of things, right? But we're gonna get back exactly the process on how to do that, later on, right? You know, I'm gonna detail a process that you guys can use to participate on open source project, okay? So guys, for you guys online, we're gonna take a break about 15 minutes.
Yep, sounds good. I'll stop, pause the recording
Yes.
and then resume, and I'll record part 2.
Right, okay, so yeah, so we're gonna come back here, after 15 minutes. So go on, we're not gonna disconnect the connection, right?
No.
So the connection gonna
I'll just
continue.
stop recording.
Right.
You know, and then.
So you're online, the connection gonna continue. I'm gonna write on the board here, they're gonna come back, so you know we're not back yet. And then we're gonna have some pizza, and you should go and take a coffee,
Yes.
and participate
Get
so we
some
can back.
food, take care of yourself, please.
So when we come back, Scott and Ed is gonna talk about, how you implement those skills. And then we're gonna wrap up with a specific process you guys can use to participate in open source, okay? All right,
Cool.
thanks very much. I'll see you guys in a
Thanks.
minute.
Those are coffee, do have nitro cold.